Sonoma Ecology Center works with our community here. It's a pretty amazing community, a lot of interconnections, a lot of really, I'm going to start this over because I'm going to take a different tack with it. I'm going to say the soundbite kind of thing, and then we can go into...
All right.
So the Sonoma Ecology Center works with our community to take care of this beautiful place. The land, the air, the water, the biodiversity. This is a tremendous legacy that we can bring on to pass on to our kids, and we feel it's absolutely essential that the community owns this legacy and brings it forward. We've been here for 26 years and we've learned a lot, and what we've learned is that if you can engage the community and get it to understand how important a place is, it will grab that spirit and start to take care of it. And we feel that's the thing you can do that's really unusual as a place-based organization. So we do this through 3 different techniques. We learn about where we live, phenomenal biodiversity in this place, really interesting hydrologic cycle, a lot going on with the way that the land is changing and people are intersecting with the land over time. Taking all this information and understanding these changes and sharing it with the community is dang. I'm just so nervous. I'm not framing it right.
You're doing great. Yeah, it sounds fantastic.
It sounds good.
Okay. So we learn about this place. This is our research program. And we take all the things that we learn here, how the water cycle works, how the biodiversity functions and needs to be connected, how the people are connected and changing it. And then we take this information through our education program and share it broadly with the community. We want decision makers to understand, we want people who manage land to understand, and we especially want the next generation to understand that this is an important legacy to be taken care of. And then we also do restorative action. We do the things that we know we can do that will help this place be sustained for the long term.
So if you could explain, what are some of the ways that you actually go about, making that change in the world?
So for the research end, we will have our scientists go out and learn how the water works here. Is it moving too fast in places? Generally, yes. How can we slow it down? What can we do that will make sure that the water gets into the ground better? Where are the best places for the water to get into the ground? How do we take this water cycle and make it something that works with nature rather than us working against nature? In the case of education, we go out into the schools and we teach the kids basic science lessons, but about their backyard, so they get inspired. We also take them out into the land and apply those lessons so they understand and get inspired by the stuff that they see around them. It's really amazing to watch kids get switched on when they get out into nature. And in terms of the restorative actions that we take, there are places that are degraded or that invasive species have come into that we can remove those invasive species or help the functions work better in those systems so they become much more resilient and healthy. We also do a lot of work in partnership, and that's probably the current strength that we're really focusing on. We bring groups of people and groups of groups together to take on critical functions. So for example, when a state park was closing in our community, at the headwaters, one of the most biologically rich parts of our community, we brought 5 organizations together, and each of us alone may not have been able to take this on, but together as a team, Team Sugarloaf, we now manage one of the largest state parks in the county.
Why is this region of the country in particular so important environmentally? What is it about this area that people who actually live here may not know and should know?
This area is one of the most biologically diverse places on the planet. It's hard to imagine. I mean, we just sort of take it for granted. But it's the intersection of a whole bunch of bioregions. From the north, south, from the coast, from the interior, everything comes together here. Tremendous geographical diversity as well because of plate tectonics and the things that have pushed up our little valleys and made these beautiful mountain ranges around us. Pushed up these beautiful mountains and made these valleys that are so attractive. But within all these niches, within all these different places, all kinds of different organisms have come to live. So that, for example, in Sonoma County and even in here in Sonoma Valley, 0.1% of the state, we may have 25% of the biodiversity of this California in this one little place. It's a tremendous legacy to be leaving for future generations.
Great. And then also talk about the challenges that we face as a society in dealing with natural spaces and climate change. I mean, what in the next generation or two, do we need to be aware of, and where should we be going?
We're seeing phenomenal change. I mean, life is change, but we're seeing a rate of change that we've never seen before, and humans have never been associated with, at least in the way that we're having to deal with the natural world. So it's incumbent on us to understand how these changes are going to be affecting us, how we can make sure that ecological systems are connected, that water systems are built to be resilient and the water doesn't just run off to the ocean and a giant massive flood, but in fact gets in and helps recharge our aquifers. We can learn how to make sure that sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So let's see, back to climate. So we can learn how to work with our communities to make sure that every little piece of land that we have is capable of sustaining a bit of change and taking advantage of that change for the ultimate benefit of the natural systems that support us. Whether that's getting water into the ground around our homes or having the right kinds of pollinator plants around that, the plants and animals that...
You can start that part over.
Sorry. I'm so embarrassed about all this. Okay, so things that we need to be doing at our home. So that our homes, we can be, even in our homes, we can be taking care of our little piece of this tremendous web of life. We can be making sure that the water gets into the ground, that the plants that we plant are capable of sustaining native animals and pollinators, that we're in fact doing the things that we need to do to make sure that this giant web sustains itself over time as change occurs. That's just so lame, I'm sorry.
Actually, it sounds really good if you just want to try one more time.
All right.
To encapsulate those thoughts into a statement. So you're talking about water going into the ground.
Yeah, and just how one manages around one's personal space.
Right.
I'm also thinking about, this is what Daily Acts is going to be also focusing on, and I want to make sure we're okay. So you're running, aren't you?
Yeah.
All right. So we also want people to understand at their homes that these are also a piece of the natural world. We're connected to the larger landscape, so that even if you're making decisions around your home landscape, you can be making sure that the water gets into the ground, that the things that you plant will sustain the animals and the pollinators for future generations, that you can do your part as part of your community to take care of this giant collective patchwork of life that we're all part of. I want to say something different than that. I'm not liking where this is wrapping up, because I want to... Can we take a different tact?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me ask you, could you just kind of explain about that patchwork for a minute?
Uh-huh.
So if you could explain how we have this variety of natural spaces around our region, and why connecting them is important, not just preserving them, but also connecting them.
It's hard to imagine when you look at a landscape how it's actually a patchwork of small spaces, little habitats. Collectively, they add up to a big space that's essential for the functioning of many of the animals that we take for granted here. Sorry. All right, I want to take a different tack. Can I have a camera off for just a second to collect my thoughts, because I don't really want you to waste this time. You're going to have to be reviewing all this.
In this digital age, we just keep shooting and shooting and shooting.
I know, but then you have to review it all.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to get at is to connect the subject matter to the viewer.
I understand.
That's
and I would do that fine if we were out for a walk, but if I'm sitting on camera, what happens is I think about 50 things instead of one, and I have a hard time consolidating. Okay. So go ahead and roll when you're ready.
Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. So it's hard to imagine when you look at a landscape like this how the connections actually make it healthy. We live in a world of lines. We love to put fences across things, roads across things. In the process of doing this, we're actually breaking apart and fragmenting the landscape. What we've learned over time, though, is that these fragments end up impoverishing the bits that are left behind. But on the other hand, the more we connect them, the more we bring these spaces together, the better they are at being able to sustain life. So we've been working a lot with our partners to connect habitats. You're looking at a valley here that is part of a giant corridor that we helped to create 25 years ago that's now still being expanded on. Ultimately, we're hoping that this connects the Pacific Ocean to the interior ranges, and this is a very, very interesting and important function. So the large carnivores, for example, that move through these spaces have the ability to find each other, so they can have mates and get to the kinds of food that they need, and ultimately that it sustains their biological integrity for the long term.
That sounded great. While I have you here,
Yeah.
I also want to ask you about water, since that's a big
Yep.
part of what you guys do.
Yep.
So I think people obviously take for granted, again, talking to the viewer, that they just turn it on and it's there. We all understand that. But if you could explain for folks how precious that water is and the challenges that we face in collecting and managing that water for now and the future.
Water is probably the most important ingredient in the California landscape, and what most of us don't realize, because we live around forests and streams, is that we live in a drought for months of the year. 5 to 7 months of every year is really no rain. The landscape has developed incredible strategies for being able to deal with that. It is able to hold on to the water, but we often find ourselves using water inappropriately and not thinking about that it's connected to this landscape that also supports us. So it's our charge to really learn how to handle this water better, to slow it down as it moves across the land, to get it into the ground so that it has a chance to refresh the aquifers that in turn feed the streams and feed our taps. It's really important for us to do everything we can to be managing water here so that it's sustainable for the landscape and for our own use into the future.
Could you explain to people how the water actually, it is the groundwater, the aquifer that makes the difference? We aren't taking it out of the Russian River directly, we aren't taking it out of Sonoma Creek directly, but it's this groundwater that filters and cleans it, as opposed to, having these huge plants.
I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
yes. Water in this area almost exclusively comes from the ground. Even our main aqueduct is fed by water that comes through a lot of different rivers, but ultimately comes through the gravels and comes through the ground. And in a place like Sonoma Valley, over 60% of the water comes directly from the ground and groundwater. So it's really important that we take care of the water that's getting into the ground, that we don't hurry it off to the ocean, that we take the time to make sure that water stays with us as long as possible, not in flood ways, but in ways that allow it to spread across slowly and get into the ground.
Perfect. Excellent. Great. Okay. That was really good.
No, it wasn't.